about Fannie Lou? Fannie Lou, Fannie Lou. Have you heard about Fannie Lou? Fannie Lou Hamer. Well, let me tell you about Fannie Lou. Fannie Lou, Fannie Lou. Let me tell you about Fannie Lou. Fannie Lou Hamer. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer was born on October 6, 1917, on a plantation near Ruleville, Mississippi. Her parents were Jim and Luella Townsend, and they were both dirt poor sharecroppers. Fannie Lou was the 20th child born to this dear couple, so she had 14 brothers and 5 sisters. Now that's a mighty large family. And finding food from day to day was often a struggle. But they survived. Their whole world revolved around picking cotton. They had to buy the cotton seed, plant it, and then pick it. And on a good year, they would pick at least 3,500 bales of cotton. That's a lot of cotton, y'all. But Mom and Dad had help with the 20 children. And even with that, they struggled to survive. And they lived in a raggedy shack on this plantation that was owned by Mr. Marlowe. Fannie said, I saw my parents struggling from day to day, and I was so upset that they could not share in the benefits of picking this cotton. That land got closed to us. We could not even own it as we worked, even though my parents struggled so hard to make this land what it was. I tell you, it just wasn't right. I woke up this morning with my mind stay on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind. It was stay on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind. It was stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Well, ain't no harm to keep your mind. Stay on freedom. Ain't no harm to keep your mind. Just keep it. Stay on freedom. It ain't no harm to keep your mind. Just keep it. Stay on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 All of the pain and sufferings that I went through made me promise myself that I'd find a way to get out of this poverty life. I didn't know who I could make a promise to, but I knew God. So I made a promise to God. And I said, God, I believe in you. So I'm asking you to give me a chance to just let me do something about what's going on down here in Mississippi. There's got to be a way out. I've got to get my family out of this terrible lifestyle, this terrible pit of slavery. It's almost like slavery. It was almost like slavery because after they would pick the cotton and get their share of what monies they were owed, they still were in debt because they had to pay the creditor, the owner of the store that they bought their supplies from, that they bought their food from. They had to pay him. So they were constantly in debt. It was a terrible, terrible cycle of credit, debt, credit, debt, credit, and debt. And Fannie Lou believed that she was going to find a way out.
Do you have good religion? Certainly, Lord. Do you have good religion? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Don't you hate segregation? Certainly, Lord. Don't you hate segregation? Certainly, Lord. Or don't you hate segregation? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Will you march for freedom? Certainly, Lord. Will you march for freedom? Certainly, Lord. Will you march for freedom? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord. Oh, don't you want to vote now? Certainly, Lord. Hey, don't you want to vote now? Certainly, Lord. Hey, don't you want to vote now? Certainly, Lord. Certainly, 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 Lord.
In 1944, Fannie Lou Townsend married Mr. Perry Hamer, who lived on a nearby plantation, and he was a tractor driver and a sharecropper. And this was just outside of Ruleville, Mississippi. For the next 18 years, Fannie Lou Hamer worked in the fields, picking cotton, and she also worked as a timekeeper, keeping the time that all of the other workers worked in the fields. And she also had to estimate how much monies they were owed after working, and then making sure that they got paid for their labor. This kind of position was called a timekeeper. And this is what she did in the daytime. And at night, she worked inside the Marlowe family's house, cleaning up, washing dishes, trying to make some extra money for her family, trying hard to get out of poverty. But, you know, this sharecropping was the way of life in the South. And it was a system as to where black people lived on plantations. Yeah, slavery was over, but this was still like a form of slavery, because they worked on the plantations, they planted the cotton or whatever it was that they had to plant. They planted those seeds, then they had to harvest it, then they had to pull it up out of the ground, pick it, whatever it was, and then half of whatever they grew went to the plantation owner, and the other half came to them. But their portion was always, always very short, because they owed for all the rest of those months when they didn't have any money, and they borrowed food and utilities on credit. So what really came to them was very, very little. And Fannie Lou was determined to find a way to get out. So you know what they did? When they got a little money, they went and bought some farm animals, you know, some mules, horses, and a cow. And this was about the time that other people were doing it too. So the white folks in Mississippi made a new law and said it was unlawful for black people to own farm animals. And in Fannie Lou's case, a neighbor noticed that they had farm animals, and he crept over to their farm one night and put poison into the animals' food and killed all of the animals that they had been caring for. So once again, Fannie Lou and her family slipped back into abject poverty with nothing, hardly anything to live on. But Fannie Lou had faith, and she believed that God was going to make a way for her.
Jump down, turn
somehow.
around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Pick a bale of cotton a day. Oh, Lord, won't you help me pick a bale of cotton? Lord, won't you help me pick a bale of cotton? Lord, won't you help me pick a bale of cotton? Pick a bale of cotton a day. Pick a bale of cotton. Pick a bale of cotton a day.
On August 27, 1962, it was a special night. Fannie Lou and her husband, Perry, went to a mass meeting that was held in one of the churches in Ruleville, Mississippi. And there was a preacher there who was an activist who wanted to bring change to Mississippi and all the other southern states. He really wanted black people to go out and register and vote. He felt that if they had voting power, this way they would be able to participate in the democratic system and make a change to Mississippi and to wherever they were living. He felt that this was a way out of poverty. So he urged all of the people that night to sign up and go to the courthouse, which was in Indianola, Mississippi, to register to vote. And when he said, "Is anybody gonna register to vote?" Guess what? Fannie Lou was one of the first persons to raise her hand and say, "Yes, I want to go. I want to register." And a few days later, there were 18 people from Ruleville, Mississippi, who got on a bus and went to the courthouse in Indianola, Mississippi, to register and vote. And all along the way, Fannie Lou sang songs to ease the tension and to make the people happy about this, what they were getting ready to do. And that was a surprise for them when they got there. They found out that by registering, they had to take a literacy test. This was a strange test. Not only did they have to tell where they lived, who they worked for, but they also had to interpret portions of the state of Mississippi's Constitution. Now, have you ever heard of such? I don't even believe they even do that in schools. We learned, when I was in school, we had to learn the Constitution of the United States of America, but not the state where I lived in, and my state was Maryland. I don't ever remember having to go and learn Maryland's Constitution. So, you know, this, I believe, was a racist tactic that they used against the African American people in Mississippi and in other states in the South to keep them from voting. They also had another trick up their sleeve. They also had a poll tax. Once you passed that literacy test, you had to have some money on you and pay a poll tax. And I think how much that cost varied from state to state. But they didn't tell Fannie Lou about that yet. They just told them at the end of the day that everybody flunked the test. Nobody passed that literacy test, so nobody got the right to vote that day. But Fannie Lou was determined in her mind that I'm going to go back and forth, and I'm going to go back and forth until I'm able to vote. I got to have this. This is my right. And she kept it in her heart. While they were riding along, singing all happy on their way back home, police stopped the bus, ordered everybody to get off the bus. They were wondering, oh, what have we done wrong? What did we do? Do you know what the police told them? He said, I'm going to arrest your bus driver because your bus is too yellow. It looks like a school bus. And you all shouldn't be riding in a bus that looks like a school bus, so I'm going to give you a ticket. As a matter of fact, if you can't pay it, I'm going to arrest you and put you in jail. Guess how much his fine was? $100. Can you imagine that? In that day and time, that was a lot of money. That was like $1,000. And of course, he didn't have it. So Fannie Lou just started singing some old freedom songs, and everybody joined in. And the policeman came back and says, well, I'm going to reduce your fine to $30. Boy, were they happy to hear that. Everybody pitched in and raised his $30 fine money, and they were able to go back home that night, safe and sound. Fannie Lou had it down in her heart that nothing was going to ever stop her from obtaining her freedom and getting the right to vote.
Keep your lamp trimmed and a burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and a burning. For the work is almost done. Oh, sister, don't you get weary. Oh, sister, don't you get weary. Oh, my sister, don't you get weary. For the work is almost done. Just keep your lamp trimmed and a burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and a burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. For the work is almost done.
When Fannie Lou returned home that night, she faced a world of trouble. Not long after she got home, Mr. Marlowe had gotten word that she had went to Indianola to register to vote, and he came knocking on her door, and he told her, listen, I want you to go back to Indianola, Mississippi, and withdraw your registration to vote. And if you don't do it, you've got to leave this plantation right away. Now, what will it be? What you gonna do? She said, well, give me till morning to make up my mind, Mr. Marlowe. He said, all right, you got till morning. Well, Fannie Lou didn't wait until morning. She grabbed her few little possessions, and she only had one dress anyway, and slipped away into the darkness and went to Ruleville, Mississippi, where there was a family known as the Tuckers. And she told them what had happened to her, and they took her in. Now, worse things happened after she left, because Mr. Perry Hamer, because he stood by her side, he suffered too. They took his wagon, they took his furniture, and they took the house that they were both living on the plantation. So he had nothing too. And he had to join her. Suddenly, two people without work, without any source of income. And she said, that's all right. I'm not going to give up. It's going to be all right. We're going to make it out of here. And I'm going to keep going back until I get the right to vote. Well, on January 10th, 1963, that was Fannie Lou Hamer's special day. Because it was on that day, her third trip to the courthouse, that she finally passed that literacy test and won the right to vote. And she was so excited, nobody could stop her from singing. But during the next election that fall, when she went to vote, they told her, oh, you've got to pay a poll tax. And if you can't pay the poll tax, you can't vote. Oh, there she was again. No, she couldn't. She had no money. Nobody had told her that she had to bring any money with her anyway. So she missed out on voting in the election. But that made her more determined. As a matter of fact, she decided to run for office. And eventually, she did run for the Senate. She lost, but she won because she encouraged so many other African Americans to vote. And Fannie Lou was the first of 30,000 African Americans in the state of Mississippi who went on to vote after her victory. So, even so, she still won. She caused so many people to see that they had the right to vote, and they went on and voted. So we cannot ever forget the rich contributions of Miss Fannie Lou Hamer.
Jesus. Tell him all about my troubles, and he'll hear my fainting cry. Oh, he'll answer by and by. Hey, when you feel a little prayer will turn it. Ooh, you know that the fire's burning. Come on now, have a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. Oh, I gotta have a little talk with Jesus and just tell him all about my troubles. Hey, he'll hear my fainting cry. Oh, he'll answer by and by. Ooh, you feel a little prayer wheel turning, and you know that's the fire burning. Just have a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. Oh, all right, all right. All right, all right. Just have a little talk with Jesus, will make it right. Oh, all right, all right, all right, all right. Hey, have a little talk with Jesus, will make it right. Oh, you ought to have a little talk with Jesus and then tell him all about your troubles. He will hear your fainting cry. Ooh, he'll answer by and by. Yeah, you'll feel that prayer will turning, and you know that the fire burning. You ought to have a little talk with Jesus. Have a little talk with Jesus. Have a little talk with Jesus, will make it right.
June 3rd, 1963 was one of the worst days of Fannie Lou Hamer's life. She went with several other civil rights workers on a trip to Charleston, South Carolina, to a meeting on voter registration where they trained civil rights workers how to recruit people to register to vote. They had to have a certain demeanor. If they were cursed at, they had to be nice and polite and courteous. So they had a wonderful time at the meeting. But on the way back, a few of the workers, you know, they had been in the meeting all day and they got hungry, and they decided to stop at the bus terminal to get something to eat. Fannie Lou stayed on the bus, but a few moments later she looked out the window and saw that 6 of the workers were running back to the bus and the police were chasing them. So, being concerned, she got off the bus to find out what was going on. The policeman ran up to her and kicked her and arrested her and all the other civil rights workers and took them to jail. She didn't know why. They didn't give a reason why. They just took them to jail. Apparently someone had told them that they had gone to this mass meeting to register people to vote. This was the worst night of her life because the police took them out one by one and began beating them unmercifully. And when it was Fannie Lou's time, the cop told 2 inmates, "You better beat her, because if you don't, we're gonna get you." So the first inmate beat her all over her body until he was tired. And then he gave the nightstick, which was a metal tool wrapped in leather. He gave it to the second prisoner, and the second prisoner began to beat her. And because she moved her legs while he was beating her all over her body, this man sat on her legs so she couldn't move. All she could do was scream and cry and scream and cry and beg them to stop. And this went on for a long time. When they finished beating her, she was so bloody and so stiff that she couldn't move. The cops had to drag her back to her cell, and they left her there to die for 3 days without calling a doctor, without calling for medical help, for none of them. all of the civil rights workers were suffering. They wouldn't even let them make a phone call for anyone to come and see about them, to let them know what had happened.
The sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now thank God Almighty, I can see through many dangers, toils, and snares. I have already come. Oh, God's grace has brought me safe thus far, and I know God's grace will lead me. Oh, thank God Almighty, it's gonna lead me. Oh.
But finally, the word got out to Reverend Andrew Young and Reverend James Bevel, two civil rights leaders at that time. And they rushed to the jailhouse and talked to the officers and paid whatever monies they had to pay to get them out of jail. Now, mind you, this was 3 days later that they had been suffering. Because of this, because Fannie Lou did not get the help that she needed, she developed a blood clot in her left eye and was nearly blind in her left eye for the rest of her life. She developed damage to her kidneys, and she suffered with kidney damage and kidney problems for the rest of her life. And it is assumed that that's why she died as soon as she did. If she hadn't been beaten, she surely would have lived longer. But the damage that was done to her that night, that awful beating, shortened her days. But she was determined. She was a fighter. She was not going to give up. And she went back to the Democratic Party and decided that she was going to go to Atlantic City to address not only the Democratic Party, but the entire nation, to let them know about the dangers and the horrible things that were happening not only to her, but all of the civil rights workers that were beaten by the police just for trying to get their brothers and sisters the right to vote.
We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. Oh, fighting for freedom, we shall not be moved. Oh, fighting for freedom, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. Oh, on my way to freedom, we shall not be moved. I'm marching for freedom. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved.
It was in August of 1964 that Fannie Lou Hamer addressed the Democratic National Party, asking to be seated with the rest of the party because she had been denied her seat. And they decided to let her speak. And the whole world saw her when she said, "I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I should have the right to vote like everybody else. And I plead with you, America, I plead with you, give us that right to vote. Give us that right to be seated with the Democratic Party like everybody else. It's time to end segregation. It's time to bring all brothers and sisters together, and let's integrate for the power to vote. And freedom should be for everybody, everywhere.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, everywhere I go now, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey, everywhere I go, y'all, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, everywhere I go now, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Yeah, in the courthouse, y'all, I'm gonna let it shine. Ooh, in the courthouse, y'all, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, in the courthouse, y'all, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Yeah, when I march for freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey, when I march for freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey, when I march for freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ooh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yay, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey.
Tune in next week when we'll explore the life of another great African American who has made great contributions to our society.
Deep down in my heart, y'all, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey, deep down in my heart now, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey, deep down in my heart now, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.